With that, I won't do anything else but introduce our panel chair, which is Professor Matt Mason from the Department of History, who's part of this project as well, and he's going to come up and then introduce the rest of the panel to us.
Thank you, Quinn, and thank you, everyone, for being here at 5 o'clock on a Thursday. We're very happy to see as many of you as are here. Yeah, I'm Professor Matt Mason in the History Department. I'll go kind of to my right, to the left. This is Katie Rolfson, BYU student history teaching, right? Social science. Yeah. I thought I knew it was one of them. Social science teaching major, and she's working currently as my teaching assistant in a class I'm teaching at the Utah State Prison in Draper. I'm trying to teach. We'll talk about that. My colleague, Professor Christopher Hodson, associate professor in the history department. He's currently teaching his second class for the University of Utah Prison Education Project, and we'll talk more about that. And then we're very happy to have Sylia Olive here, former student of mine, at the Timpanogos facility at the state prison in Draper. She left my class for the very best of reasons. She got out. That's the only reason I want people to ever leave my class. And so we're very happy to have her here as an alumnus of the University of Utah Prison Education Project. This is a partnership that developed about a year ago. So the University of Utah Prison Education Project is an ongoing thing. I think it was founded in 2017. Professor Erin Castro up at the University of Utah, she is the kind of founder, and this is related to her research. She researches in education, and so her research is very much directed towards prison education in prison, and as part of that, she has been running the Prison Education Project out of the University of Utah. A few BYU professors, beginning last year, started to collaborate with Upep. That's what we'll just use as a shorthand. That's University of Utah Prison Education Project, Upep. And we're very happy to say this semester, for the first time in the history of Upep, both my class in U.S. history and Chris's class in the French Revolution are being offered for credit through BYU Independent Study. So it's a true partnership between the University of Utah and BYU, and we're just thrilled, thanks to some donors and the work of former Dean Ben Ogles, to have been able to secure the funding necessary to make it so that these people are getting credit for the first time. So we're very excited about that. And I just want to introduce a few questions for our panelists, because I want to maximize Q&A. Some pretty basic questions. We'll just go in order. I'll go last. So Katie, and then Chris, and then Sylia. First of all, what got you individually involved with UPEP?
Okay, yeah. Most of my story involves my relationship with Dr. Mason. It started because I was an intern in Washington, D.C. through the BYU's Washington Seminar Program. I interned at the Department of Education. And while I was there, one of the things that we did was tour surrounding universities and learn kind of about some of the things they're involved in. So as an intern, I went to both Georgetown University, which is in the D.C. area, and to UVA in Virginia, and learned about a project that both of them were doing. I promise this is all related, they were doing slavery projects. So doing research with their university and its history with slavery, what they had done, how they had used slaves to build their universities or sold slaves to get money to build their universities, all of the history that they had, and then kind of reparations. What are they doing now? Are they offering scholarships to slave descendants or different things like that? And so I heard about these different projects, and I asked my the professor who's with us, Rebecca DeSchweinitz, if any of you have had her in the history department. I was like, this is so cool. Like, I don't really feel like BYU has a history with it. In my naive thinking, I was like, but we should do something. And she was like, oh, people are steps ahead of you. You should contact Dr. Matt Mason in the history department. And Dr. Mason and Dr. Jones had started a BYU slavery project actually that year, and so I was able to get involved with that and do research with Dr. Mason about BYU's history with slavery, which there is a history with slavery. But through that, I learned about his involvement with Upep, and learning history really taught me that there is a pretty serious pipeline. There's a relationship between slavery and what our prison system looks like today, and so it kind of led me to become involved with this program, and research for him through that led me to TAing through this. So that's kind of my story to UPEP.
Right on.
Yeah, so my origin story as a UPEP volunteer basically begins with Ken Burns. It sounds a little lame, but in any case, I watched I've been interested in prison education for some time. I have some colleagues at other universities, including a place called Bard College in New York State, who actually participated in prison education. And there was a Ken Burns produced documentary some years ago, I believe called College Behind Bars, that I wound up watching about Bard College's prison education program. And it's full service, so they provide a pathway for folks at that particular New York State prison nearby Bard College to get bachelor's degrees in a variety of disciplines. And it's an exceptionally successful and I think really kind of remarkable program. And once I finished, hit stop on my like Roku or whatever, I started Googling prison education and wound up forthwith at the Utah Prison Education Project at the University of Utah. And basically the story from there is about me pestering Erin Castro until she let me teach a class at the Utah State Prison. So I've taught, I'm in the middle of teaching my second course at the Promontory facility at the Utah State Prison, which is a facility that houses male inmates, and it also houses a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program. So I taught a version of an early American history course there last semester, and then I'm teaching an upper division course for credit on the history of the French Revolution to 12 incarcerated students this semester. Sorry. And it's been, as the Ken Burns documentary might have suggested, there it is. I just have been described as ear-splittingly loud before, so I'm always reluctant to use microphones. But as the documentary would suggest, it's been a really, really rewarding experience.
Hi, my name is Sylia. So I was incarcerated for, I want to say 16 years before I had heard about college and prison. And before I got locked up, I was starting to take classes with Salt Lake Community College, and that ended quickly because I got locked up. And so I had earlier tried to get involved with Salt Lake Community because them and Snow and UVU were the only colleges there at the time. But I couldn't attend because of the previous time that I had been in Salt Lake Community College and dropped the class not right or something. And so I had a fine or something. So they wouldn't let me attend. So finally in like 2017, Salt Lake Community College came back, and I went and begged to come back, and they were like, you don't owe us anything. You can absolutely come back. And so I was like, yes, thank you, Lord. So I attended Salt Lake Community College for the first year, and UPEP had started in 2017. And there was like only like 4 or 5 students, like a handful of students at the time on the women's side. And all of them were all my friends. And they were like, you gotta do this, because they knew how I felt about education. And I was like, dude, it's not gonna stay long. First of all, it's for no credits, and it sounds too good to be true. So I'm not even gonna waste my time and take those upper division classes for nothing. And so a year later, I was like, they're still here, that's amazing. And so I was like, I'm gonna go and test and see. So I went and tested and got in, and after that, I just took every single class they offered. Didn't care what it was, didn't really like history in high school, but I took Dr. Mason's class, and now I'm in love with history. I'm in love with history. But yeah, no, I took every class there, and so anytime Erin Castro asks me to do anything, I jump at it since I've been home, because they did a lot to change my life, seriously. Like, education is the only thing, I believe that, and my dog is what keeps me on the straight and narrow path, keeps me going, but yeah.
awesome. Other than the dog, that's a happy ending. Especially you came to understand the value of history. This is going to sound familiar to you. I had a long-running interest in the idea of prison education. I admired friends that I had that had done that at other universities. And then I watched this documentary by Ken Burns. Independent of Chris, we used to talk a lot more. We used to play tennis, and I would, be crying on the way home, and he would help. We'd had a lot to talk about. But in this case, we just kind of both independently came to Upep after watching that same documentary and getting inspired by the vision of the value of taking prison education into our prison system, and. So in that process, I started teaching with Sylia and others last fall, U.S. Civil War class, and then this fall, History 220, Early American History, that will sequence to the Civil War class with the same group of men that I'm teaching now in winter. So very similar stories, and then we both found out, our offices are like 2 offices away from each other, but it took a while before we figured it out. It was pandemic. It was all weird. So we have a title here, Opportunities and Challenges of Higher Education in Prison. I want to start with the second thing. Let's be realistic and talk about the challenges from all these points of view of trying to take higher education into the Utah State Prison. Katie, go.
Okay. Challenges. I feel like I should answer the before I started working with the program challenges and then challenges that we've actually experienced this semester. I think pre is, in all candidness, intimidation, I think is part of it, and then just not being aware and not knowing. I spent this last weekend at, let me see if I can get the acronym right, the National Conference for Higher Education in Prison. UPEP was really nice and let me go to this conference in Denver and got to spend the weekend with a lot of formerly incarcerated students and people from other universities who are trying to put this together. And I think one of my takeaways was that it's just not, people don't know, people aren't aware of the good that it could do and how really doable it is. And I think that, the first time I had ever even considered it or heard about it was learning that Dr. Mason was a part of it, or through a Ken Burns documentary, whatever it takes, right? But I don't think it's something that we talk about. So I think awareness is maybe a challenge of why things aren't happening. I think because of the culture that surrounds it and because of maybe the ways that it's portrayed in media, or especially for, some of us, the way that we've maybe grown up with that vision of what prison looks like in our heads, it could be a really intimidating thing to become involved with. And luckily, jumping in and just kind of getting over that has torn down any of the intimidating factors and has shown me it's just people, and it has been such an awesome experience. Challenges within is a whole different chapter we could spend the rest of the night talking about. I don't think I will get in trouble here from anyone with the UDC, but the prison is an extremely unorganized place, and there's not a lot of consistency or structure. And so learning to be flexible and to teach within that is a challenge. And I think not losing hope when, Dr. Mason and I haven't been for 3 weeks now to our class because of COVID and not wanting to be safe, but we're not able to, we can't zoom into the prison, we can't contact our students. We have no real assurance that they're getting the information that we're sending, and so that's a challenge. And I guess the bigger umbrella challenge of that is that our goal in educating and bringing hope is different than the goal of corrections department, and so sometimes operating in the same vicinity is difficult because our goals are not always the same.
Yeah, that's a really good summation.
And so I think there's a kind of meta problem, and that is that there's a certain population within the United States that is often in political power that simply doesn't believe that higher education has any place in the carceral system. And to the extent that it does, it should be confined to technical education, not history classes, not communications classes, not biology classes that you or I might take as we go to get our bachelor's degree. And I just, fundamentally disagree, and hopefully the needle on that is moving to some degree. So there's a kind of big umbrella challenge about, sort of getting higher education opportunities and pathways to real degrees to incarcerated people. Logistical challenges aplenty. I'll mention a couple, 3. So for one thing, everything that my students look at, I have to give them physically. They have no access to the internet at all. They have no computers. They have no library. So everything they get, I have to bring to them, okay? And that can be kind of a fraught process. Number 2, random occurrences, right? So prison, in my experience, is a place where there's a lot of kind of noise, right? So low predictability, unfortunately. So alas and mercifully, this didn't occur to one of my students. I have seen the Promontory SWAT team in action. And it's a whole thing. And it's disruptive, and it prevented me from holding class for an entire night, actually trapped me in Promontory for some number of hours while stuff went down and so on. And that's quite a deal. And so maximum flexibility on our part is really, really important. Finally, and this will come as no shock to anybody up here and probably no shock to you, incarcerated people, even in the best of circumstances, are not well treated. Just to give one example of many, my 12 students in Promontory spent 5 or 6 days at some point during the last couple of weeks having 2 meals a day because of a COVID sick out. So there was no staff to feed them, and so they only got 2 meals a day, one of which was, and this will reveal much about my Netflix habit, it's the meal from Squid Game. It was a hard-boiled egg and a little tiny bag of cold cereal with no milk. So think through then having those 2 meals and then going to a 3-hour-long class about the French Revolution. So there's some real issues just generally with kind of getting people not just access, but in a kind of physical place where they can do the work that we're asking them to do.
Wow, where do I start? There's so much wrong with the prison system, and I don't care if I get in trouble. But I'll start with ego and finances. That's like the main thing. Like the prison is really run on like whoever's working. When I say on, but that means whoever's working at the time. It's based on their ego and whether or not they feel like we deserve education for that day, and finances, and that's like for the prison as a whole, because if the prison is not getting any money or made to look good in the media light, then they're not going to do it. Regardless if it helps us become better people so that we go out to your neighborhoods, because we're going to be eventually back in the neighborhoods that you guys all live in. Like, make us better people. Let us learn so that we can be better people. But so ego and finances is like the biggest problem there. I know for a lot of times with us, especially with the Upep students were a group of really educated women in the prison, and so they seen a lot of the injustices that were happening in there, and they weren't going to be quiet about it, and so they would speak up about it, and so they were labeled problem kids, and so a lot of us were told, oh, your teacher's not here today, and our teachers would be sitting in the classroom waiting for us for 3 hours. So that was a big issue as well there. But yeah, SWAT happens a lot. COVID made it worse for sure, because because a long time ago with UVU, they were able to, I don't even know what it's called. I'm so technologically dumb, but they were able to have classes on the TV or whatever. Mm-hmm. But so I don't know what the issue is now. I guess they won't let us do it now because they said that we can tap into the internet or something, which I have no idea, and I don't know how anybody in there is going to know how to do that. But so that's the reason why they don't let us have the internet and stuff. And if we do have some sort of internet or whatever, it's like in a closed circuit. Like, it's stuff that's already pre-approved by the higher ups and we have to literally wait for them to be ready to go through all this stuff and approve it. And education is on the very, very bottom rung as far as security is concerned. Security is the uppermost concern. So we couldn't have mechanical pencils because apparently we can escape with mechanical pencils. I don't know how. I wanted to know. I was like, and they were like, we ain't telling you. But yeah, so we just ran into a lot of issues with security. They were like, oh, you guys can't have erasers. That's a security issue. And we were like, okay, you guys can't have paper. You have to buy your own paper. So then UPEP was like, these students are already getting paid 40 cents an hour at their job that they work at, and now you want them to buy a $4 pack of paper to come to a class where they're not getting any credit. Like, come on now, let us give them paper. And so it was just a lot of issues like that. Books were a huge issue to get in. Just the whole system is just set up for education to fail in there. And it did. Like, I've watched it. In the 19 and a half years that I was there, I've seen colleges slowly leave because they just did not want to deal with it anymore, with the prison, with all the politics that came with it. And it's sad because then we sit there and suffer as far as like getting educated and learning about the world and stuff. Like, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we could go on, but this captures well that in the best of times, the Utah Department of Corrections, and that's not unique to Utah, is not set up to do what it is that we do. There's talk about rehabilitation, but what they're best at in an unorganized way, ironically, is to discipline and punish rather than educate and rehabilitate. And then COVID made it so that it was not the best of times. So the best of times, it's fraught with all the challenges. In our Civil War class, we began in August, and we didn't end until our 4th syllabus revision on Eddie Van Halen's birthday. So that would have been January 26th, 2021. And I thought, oh, this fall, we won't go into our 4th syllabus. We now are working on our 3rd because we had a 2-week-long shutdown because of COVID in one of the facilities. So we have students from 2 facilities. So 2-week-long lockdown, and then we thought we were going to be able to go back this last Tuesday, and then we learned very last minute that because we bring people from 2 facilities, they can't mix for COVID reasons. So yeah, we're still anguishing over syllabus number 3, none of which is to say that we are the ultimate sufferers, Katie and I, right? I mean, we talk since about March 2020 about lockdown in American society. This is real lockdown, right? So this is part of what fuels me is that no matter the inconvenience and the nonsense that is involved, it's nothing compared to what my students are dealing with at the Utah State Prison. And that, I think, is a way to transition to my last question for the panel, and then we'll throw it open for Q&A. Again, this is something we could go on and on about, but what have been the best things? What have been the most awesomest things about working with UPEP?
Do I have to go first again?
Yeah.
Always.
Okay. Oh, that's such a good question. I think maybe 2 things. So the first, I think, like personally, the perspective change that it's brought for me. I think, so I am like a history student, and then I've been involved with this, and kind of those combined, I think, has taught me, hopefully I don't step on any toes here, but like I really believe that we messed up, as we said, we as in society, history, as we set up our prison system. I think we've made mistakes, and it is not where it should be. And a really important thing that I feel like I've learned interacting with these students is that I could just have easily like switched places with you had I been born in a different place. Like there's not, in most cases, I really feel like there's not fundamental differences between me and these students. We want the same things, we love the same things, we care about our families and our loved ones, and we want hope and education. We're the same people, right? We have very different environments and very different life paths. And that's been a really humbling experience, and it's made me feel obligated to do something, because I think really for most of my life I've been, like warmed by this fire I didn't have anything to do with starting. And so that's been really important for me to see, and important for just like the rest of my life, for my perspective to shift in that direction and how I see other people. And then I guess the other best part, the other reward, is just like the relationships I've built with the student. We have like 8 men that come consistently who I just adore, and who have it blows my mind that they can come in on a for a 3-hour history class. No offense, but like, 3-hour history class. And they're so excited to be there and so happy and so thoughtful. Several times one of our students they find like clips in newspapers that they think I or Dr. Mason will enjoy, and they cut them out and bring in, you mentioned you like this and I found this in the newspaper for you. Or we had someone who brought in like a little bag of lilac that he somehow snuck from a greenhouse because he thought it would make our bag smell better, and they cleaned the board. Like just the hope and the attitude of these students who I really feel like have every right to be hopeless and to not try and to not put in this effort. They totally do. And so I think that's been just an amazing thing for me to see and to build these relationships with people that I've really just come to love.
Yeah, so, for me, one of the more remarkable things about teaching at Promontory is that visually, when you sort of come to class, everybody gets settled down, it looks a little different than a BYU classroom. First of all, Promontory is kind of a hellhole. Second
And
of all,
it seems to be the nicest facility.
oh yeah, it's,
Yeah,
The
it
nicest
is.
one.
It
No,
is
you-
the nicest.
No,
one.
You're super posh over
you
there.
got a window.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Okay, that is true.
But looking out at the students in that class, it's a little different than a BYU classroom. There's like way more face tattoos, I can tell you that for sure. But what's amazing is how fast it just becomes a class, because they've read stuff about a period and about issues that I really like talking about. They've become interested, and once it starts going, it is just a class. And you're not dealing with dudes who've been inside for 25, 30 years, which some of my students have been. You're dealing with students, same as at BYU. Another thing that popped into my mind as I was sort of saying that is that I'm actually teaching, and I see one of my students in this class. I'm teaching my French Revolution class at BYU right now and at the prison. And one of my favorite things in my BYU French Revolution class, and James does this every once in a while, Jess, and other people do this, we'll be talking about something, trial of Louis XVI or whatever. And somebody in my BYU class will raise their hand and say, hey, what did the Promontory guys say about this? And I'll say, actually, yeah, it was kind of different. And so then we'll kind of go through that. And I told that to them. I went one time when I was in Promontory, I said, hey, funnily, the BYU students are pretty interested in what you think about things. And they were so delighted that you were thinking about them. And so that to me is just really, really powerful, and it speaks to the connection that education across distance, across social barriers can create among people.
I have so much more positive things to say about UPEP than I do about the bad things that happen with the prison, but I want to just focus on a couple things. Like, I think the best thing about UPEP being at the prison is it brought a whole different atmosphere to the prison. Because a lot of the girls that were in our class were in different, there's 4 buildings, well, 3 technically, 3 buildings that can come. One of them is a max building where nobody comes out of. But in the 3 buildings that women were able to come to the classes, the women that were in the classes helped change the atmosphere that was in the units. It not only, well, okay, so I was telling I don't know who I was telling somebody the other day that it was a serious thing with quiet time. Like, there's a certain time from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that that you had to be quiet. And it was real serious, because if you're a UPIP student, you had to make sure you read all the material that you were given, because when I first joined UPEP, I really thought that they were going to dumb it down a little bit for us, but they really didn't. And so it was really hard at first. And so quiet time was super like, don't make noise, because we're going to have problems later on if I can't study, you know what I mean? So it brought like a whole different atmosphere, like people seeing the importance of education to the girls that were there for a longer amount of time than they were there for. So it kind of prompted them to want to go and check out Salt Lake Community College, because they can do that. They're there for shorter periods of time. So it definitely brought a different aura, I want to say, to the buildings, for sure. The other thing had to do a lot with the volunteers. I'm sorry. But being incarcerated, you get forgot. And to see these like young 20-year-olds come in and be so excited to want to give us something or teach us something, it gave us hope to want better for ourselves. Watching the teachers come in and be so excited about history, and I'm like, why is he so excited about history? I mean, I have a whole different view about Abraham Lincoln now. But yeah, just like it brought back, like, especially like with me almost getting out, like I had created like a hard shell before I came home, and like just seeing the humanity that these people brought into the prisons, and like they genuinely cared and wanted us to learn. That was one of the best things about UPEP. And also, I was always such a big BYU fan, and I always wondered why you guys never came, you know? I even named my nephew Brigham. But UPEP came in, and then it just like, I feel like it's gonna be like a rush of help now where it's needed the most. And I love that. And so I just appreciate you guys coming and having an interest in this, because it is needed.
I think it's hard to top or even really add to that, but we live in a time in our nation's history where even higher education is under question and attack from various points of view, both political and otherwise. And one of the battles we're constantly fighting in a discipline like history is kind of a vocational approach to history. It's only about securing your future job and all that sort of thing. None of which to say that isn't important, but to me, it's kind of the flip side of what Sylia was saying. To go in and teach a history class to people that were not getting credit, but were doing all the reading. And it was the reading I would do here in Provo, unless it's like stuff I could, we're relying on donations and then taking those books to the people in our classes. So for instance, Katie and I, the first night this semester we got in, but our books didn't. Like, we were cleared, I guess that was nice, but our books weren't. Like, so there are some limits to the amount of the kind of reading you can do. But like, if I needed to have my faith in education restored, it was UPEP that did it, right? Like, they would have done it. Like, here are people who are not even getting credit, who are doing the work. We had some fantastic conversations about the material. It was an interesting time to be teaching about the U.S. Civil War during an election year. The number of times our conversations moved towards connecting past to present was more than what I experienced in a typical BYU classroom. I learned to under-prepare for my UPEP classes in terms of the amount of content I can deliver, because the discussion is going to be so engaged that I'm just going to be able to lecture less. And so there are the benefits for me, but yeah, I've seen the benefits for the students. One of the more, I guess, inspiring / heartbreaking moments was, I think it was after you had left. We had moved into kind of discussing the memory of the American Civil War, and we had film assignments where they were watching various films and how they had depicted the Civil War and thinking about clips that they were going to show. And then as the syllabus fell apart, I kind of said, let's, that's optional now, which of course meant that the most dedicated among us, we're going to show our clips. So we gathered around a laptop, because the technology is, what you might expect in these classrooms. But then I remember one of them talking about, one of her films was Lincoln, the Steven Spielberg film, and that one of the guards, seeing her watching that, struck up a conversation with her about the film, and she said that was the first time she had interacted with this guard as a human being. Like, that broke my heart, but convinced me of everything that Sylia was talking about. So I'll leave it there, and we can open it up for questions.
I've got a microphone, so let me bring it to you if you have a question.
Hi, my name is Annie. Before tonight, I haven't really learned anything about higher education in the prison system. So I was just curious about what that looks like. Like, you talked about going to Salt Lake Community College. Like, I didn't know, like, you could go out to that if you were incarcerated. So what does that look like, and what are the opportunities from that for like preparing you for other higher education outside?
So I was doing both of them at the same time. So with Salt Lake Community College, you're only allowed to take a certain amount of classes. You can only take 2 classes a semester because of the limited amount of space, the ratio between inmates and the officer that was in the building. They couldn't go past that for safety reasons. So we were only allowed to take a couple of classes a semester. But we did get credit with them. And so how it's transferring over for me now is I'm waiting to finish my application. I'm trying to finish my application to get into the U. Right now, I've got, in 2 years, like you can imagine, I think in 2 years, how many credits would you normally have?
60.
I have 31. And I took every single class I could. I like stacked myself up all the time. And I was even begging to take more classes. I was like, I'm just one person. Nobody else is going to want to take more classes, I swear to you. And they were like, well, if we let you, then we have to let everybody. And I'm like, I'll make sure they don't. And they were like, Olive, calm down, we know you love education, but no. But so now I'm like super excited to just get into class, and I just want to stack myself up full because I need to catch up. I need to catch up with everything else. Like, I'm 42 years old. I got incarcerated when I was 23. And so there's a lot of things that I need to catch up with. And so I'm trying to get in. So I did apply right when I got out, and my application got denied because Salt Lake Community College sent the wrong transcripts. And so they got the 1997 transcripts instead of the 2020 transcripts. And so now I have to start the whole process all over again. But thankfully, Erin is a godsend, and she keeps, because when I want to give up, she texts me and she's like, girl, I know you're not giving up, right? Like, come on now, what do you need help with? And I'm like, I can do it, I can do it. But yeah, definitely the credits will transfer over, thank goodness. So yeah, I don't know if that answers.
That's what we're hoping with the BYU Independent Study credit is. It'll be transferable. And one thing to clarify that may or may not have been part of your question, none of this involves incarcerated students going somewhere else. This is us going in to the facilities such as they are at the point of the mountain, which has a certain liberating quality for me as a technophobe. I tried early in our semester with PowerPoint. It was hilarious. And I just liberated myself, and now I just am marker technology. Like, marker on a whiteboard, that is my level of technology, teaching the class.
Beautiful drawings.
Yeah, the drawings, the maps, they become legendary. But yeah, it's all about going in there. And I assume the prison was not a super fantastic physical location before, but now it's just like, they don't care because they're building a new prison. So it's just, driving through there is pretty dire. The joint is just falling apart.
There's one here. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Makel, and I have 2 questions here. One is for the panel, and then one is for you. What will expanded curriculum look like in terms of past the history classes, past the French Revolution? And then for you, what will the rest of your educational track look like? Do you want to pursue something in history because that is the foundation that you had while in prison?
There is no curriculum beyond the French Revolution. That's so ideally, and it depends, like the timeline that we're thinking of. As far as I'm concerned, the ideal is to provide a pathway to a bachelor's degree inside the prison. And the limiting factor, basically, I trust, I cross my fingers, is actually space inside the prison. It's my contention, and I've mouthed off about this, and I'm usually not a huge BYU booster, even though I'm a faculty member. I didn't go to school here and stuff, so I tend to react negatively to BYU sports teams and whatever. But my contention is, and I've mouthed off about this, whatever the limiting factor is, it won't be BYU faculty, and it won't be BYU students. They will volunteer across all disciplines. So the limiting factor is always going to be kind of space and time. But I think in the kind of medium term, the ideal is to produce not just a pathway to an AA from SLIC, which is great, but a pathway to a bachelor's degree.
I agree that should be doable. I mean, we have had multiple faculty just talk to us about what our experience has been like, and there's no shortage of interest. It didn't take much to recruit Katie. I mean, I see you, Katie, as your training in pedagogy is like enormously beneficial to my students. I meet with them in class on Tuesdays, and Katie comes with me, and then Thursday nights are kind of like office hours. They're called the Teaching and Learning Lab. Katie's is just like super awesome. Everything I'm hearing is like, my office hours are, no, from what I'm hearing, my office hours are like substandard. Like, they're so structured, they're so helpful, and that's got to be beneficial to you for your later teaching career, right? So I agree entirely with Chris that this should be scalable up and across disciplines.
So,
but Sylia, were you?
Oh, go ahead. You have something else?
Oh, I was just going to answer the second part of her question. So funny thing, you brought up the technical schools and stuff. When I first started getting into education at the prison, I actually did culinary arts because that's one of the only things that's available to women because we need to stay in the kitchen. So I graduated culinary arts and I wanted to be a chef for sure. And then I started doing dog training and I wanted to be a dog trainer for sure. And then I got into education and now I just want to be a nerd. I just want to be in school for the rest of my life. And my mom is so cool with it. She's like, I will pay for everything if you want to stay in school. But right now I want to do business. I want to get into the Echo School of Business, and I want to hopefully run some sort of dog training business. Where we cook also. I don't know.
So
I'll use everything.
So I'll exercise the prerogative of asking a question, and then I'll look for somebody else. Give us the next step. So if somebody in the room, faculty or student, wants to become involved, what's the immediate next thing to do?
I would say if you're faculty and you have a range of questions about our experience and how to connect, I'll speak for myself, be happy to talk with you. If you are sure you want to contribute and have ideas for classes, I would do what we did and contact Erin Castro, who runs Upep, and because she has a vision of the whole program and where this class might fit and whatnot. It took a little bit for both of us to convince her we were worthy, and that maybe that sort of thing. But UPEP has a reasonably user-friendly, even for me, website, and I'd say connect with her via that. But I don't know if.
I mean, I think ultimately we'd love the partnership to be a little more, on some level, formal between BYU and UPEP. Right now, it's a volunteer operation run on a shoestring. Matt and I are, we're kind of clowns. We show up and dance around and stuff. Erin actually knows, the UPEP folks know the landscape of the prison. They know the landscape of prison higher education, so they're the people to contact with your ideas.
Hi, my name is Dan. Could you help us better understand what are the current legislative efforts in the state? And what's holding the state back from changing the way that correctional facilities operate?
You know this stuff, Chris.
A little, yeah, right. So the landscape right now is, as ever, somewhat bleak but improving, let's put it that way. There is on the horizon, and I should caveat this in 1,000 different ways, the Utah State Legislature is a black box to me. I don't really understand sometimes why it exists or what's happening within it. But there is the prospect, there is the prospect of a bill that will be introduced in this legislative session that will help fund higher education kind of at this level inside the Utah State Prison. Right now, what there is, as Sylia has mentioned, there's SLIC is able to go in, limited by space. Davis Tech is able to go in and do culinary arts and so on. But again, that's sort of it, which I tend to think of as insufficient. And in my less fatalistic moments, I tend to think that it's the case that right now, the fact that mass incarceration doesn't work for incarcerated people and for taxpayers is one of those very few things that actually people on both sides can kind of agree on sometimes. And so the hope is that we'll move away from the kind of warehousing system, which is what we have now, toward an actual rehabilitative model. And this piece of legislation, which again, crossing our fingers, gets introduced, it's to be introduced potentially by Lowry Snow, who's a representative from St. George. I'm crossing my fingers that that gets funded. That'll give, again, the limiting factor really is kind of money in space, basically. You got this in Utah, massive reservoir of people of goodwill at universities and so forth, students like Katie, you know, doofuses like us, who will show up and do this work. It's just a matter of giving UPEP a little bit of funding, a little bit of space in the prison.
Probably last question, and then we'll close. No pressure.
Make it good.
Don't
Yeah, no. Oh shoot. Maybe I should think of a new question. No, I was just wondering like where currently the funding comes from, and like where in the future you're hoping to get more from, and what that looks like, and like what incentives you could give to those funders and all that kind of thing. Because I don't know, if it's legislator, then it's taking money from schools, and so
Sure.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you about the way it currently operates, and then there's surely other people can weigh in on this. So both Chris and I and Katie are just straight up volunteers. This is not part of our normal teaching load. We're teaching our normal classes at BYU this semester, and then also at the prison. Katie has got a day job as a student and like running American Heritage, and then does this as a volunteer. The fact that the way we were able to make for credit happen was that our former dean, Ben Ogles, in the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences, when we talked to him about the possibility of classes for credit, he knew of a donor that would be all over this. Like from a gospel, I take it from a gospel perspective, kind of Matthew 25 stuff, like you ministered unto the least of these as a gospel imperative. And this donor just made it happen. I have 8 students. You have 12.
Yep.
So that's 20 people's tuition that is being paid via BYU Independent Study by this donor. To scale up beyond that, we'd need more donors or state funding. But that's the kind of where it currently and why it currently stands the way it is. But there may be other things to add.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add that, so I teach on Monday nights, and then my teaching and learning lab is actually Saturday mornings. And there was a morning a few weeks ago where I have 3 TAs actually to do the job of Katie. No, they're great. They're incredible, actually. But there was a scheduling thing, and 2 of them couldn't go. And so I went with one of the TAs to a teaching and learning lab. And I was kind of like pissy about it. It was Saturday morning and stuff, and I didn't really want to and whatever. And I happened to be meeting with this donor later that week. And so we did some stuff in the class, and then I asked my guys, all right, what do you want me to tell this guy who gave you the money to pay your tuition? And I'm not sure I can like get it out, what they said. But as I was walking out of the multiple doors you have to use to exit Promontory, and the gates were opening, and I was finally out to my car, I thought, man, that was totally worth it to come down here this Saturday morning. And all these guys wanted was a shot. Just give them a shot. They've got the talent. I see it when they do their exams. I see it when they write their papers. They've got the capacity. They just need the chance. And so, I recognize that, money has to come from somewhere, and everything has a cost, but this is worth it. It just is.
You should have ended with that, sorry. But as far as like student interest in being involved, I was able to like secure a grant for like a transportation stipend. So BYU gave me a grant from the history department because it's 25 miles up to Draper and back twice a week. So BYU did provide that, which is super helpful.
Right on. So just chance for a closing statement. from all of us, and we'll go in our usual order. Any last thing you didn't feel like you ought to say? You don't want to end with just mileage, so
No, I
whatever last thing you want to say.
No, I guess I just would reiterate what I said before, that I really feel like getting to know these students has helped me see both, I guess, my obligation to do something, because it really is. I've been born into a circumstance where I've been so blessed to have an education really easily, and that's just not the case for everyone, and not because of always their choices. And so I feel that the more I've learned about it and the more that I've connected with these students, the more I've understood that we really do have an obligation to do something for these people that, like Sylia said, are often forgotten.
I'll just add that this is, I think, precisely the kind of thing that BYU, faculty and students should be doing, based on the mission of our institution. It's part of our job. We are obligated, to do this kind of work. I'll tell you, it is an experience to go in and an experience to come out, I think, for all of us. And I recognize, way more than I ever did before I started doing this, the obligation that I have to on some level, bring the university and that relationship between teacher and student, which I think of as sacred. I don't really think that many things are sacred, but I think that's sacred. It's my obligation to bring that inside that prison.
I don't know what to say. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to come up here and talk to you guys. I know that you guys probably hear this a lot, and you guys are like, yeah, whatever. But you guys really are the future. Like, we are dependent on what you guys do next after here. You know what I mean? Not after this group, but you know what I mean? After you graduate and go out into the real world. But yeah, you guys are what's going to change the world. Like, I know I was told that when I was in high school, and I messed it all up. But I'm trying to get it back. I'm trying to go back to, you know what I mean, getting to where, to who I was supposed to be. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity. I'm so grateful for Upep and BYU for coming through and bringing that. Like, education is like just the surface of it. Like, really, it's the gospel you guys are really sharing, you know what I mean? And so it's crazy to me to see it come full circle for me being in there and then out here and seeing it just continue on. And I love that. And so I'll do whatever I can to help you guys.
Right on. I'm not going to add to that. She's going to have to have the last, right?
I think our panelists are likely to be able to hang around and answer one-on-one questions for a few minutes, but we'll end it there. Join me in thanking our panel today.